I'm Philip Stoten from My House to Yours. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. I am joined by Sanjay from IPC, who seems to have growing responsibility. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was the IPC's activities in Europe. Are you still in Europe, or are you back in the US today?
No, I just arrived back after a great 1-week trip to France. We participated in the global industry event there. Mm-hmm. I am back in the US for a few weeks, and then we're off to teams off to Brussels for a couple of days in the second week of April to work with some of our policymaker friends there.
Yeah, fascinating. I caught up with Philippe last week or the week before last at the an event in Munich. Yes. And there just seems to be so much going on with you guys, with statistics, with other activities in Europe. I saw on LinkedIn that you were doing another hand soldering awards last week. So just give me a broad brush of some of the activities that are happening in Europe and why it's such a big focus for IPC at the moment.
Great. Yeah, it's my pleasure to do that. Thank you, Phil, for having me and for having IPC on your event show here today. We have been extremely active in Europe the last 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. If you look at our main pillars for IPC, we focus in 4 key areas: standards, education, advocacy, and solutions. Historically, through our relationship with our licensed training centers spread out all across Europe, we really spent the bulk of the first 15 to 20 years of this century on the E part of it, the education part of it, mainly certification training. Yeah. If you look at our statistics from the last couple of years, IPC on average over the last 2 years has certified about 120,000 people globally. And I would say Europe probably makes up around 20 to 22% of that. So somewhere around 25,000-ish. It's a lot of people. But what we've done the last 3 years, and certainly as we look forward to the next 5 years, we want to focus on the other 3 pillars in addition to education. So standards, advocacy, and solutions has kind of been our main focus as we go forward. So how do we do that? We are building relationships with a lot of OEMs because we want them to participate more in our standards development committees. A lot of those companies, even though they may have farmed out the assembly portion to the EMS, they are still responsible for the design, mainly for the bill of materials. So they have a heavy say in the quality and reliability of the end product. So being more engaged in the standards committees, we think, is a great way to get the OEMs in. In terms of advocacy, as you know, Phil, the US passed their version of the CHIPS Act. Europe is about to pass their version of the CHIPS Act. We were influential in some of the language that's in the European CHIPS Act, and we applaud and support the work of the European CHIPS Act, but it doesn't go far enough for the entire ecosystem. In order for Europe to achieve its main goals, and my understanding, Phil, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Europe's main goal is to be technically sovereign and have supply chain resiliency. So building semiconductors in Europe is an important step. But from a supply chain resiliency standpoint, if everything else in the ecosystem is done outside of Europe, well, then how can you be sovereign, right? So we applaud the CHIPS Act, but our push and our advocacy for the delegates and the policymakers in Europe is great. Now let's go further. Let's include PCB. Let's include EMS. Let's include materials. Let's make sure that there's adequate capacity and capability for all of the supply chain in order for Europe to be truly sovereign.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And when I look at it, I was born in Europe. I currently live in Australia. I've lived in the US and Mexico. So I kind of look at it from all the different regions. And whichever way you cut it, shorter supply chains are good for the environment. They seem to be good for local economies. So having this regionalized supply chain seems a very positive thing. And that means, having a solid supply chain in the US and throughout North America, and having a solid supply chain in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and throughout that region as well. So there are lots of cross benefits, and I can see where your involvement in the US CHIPS Act and the European CHIPS Act would add a lot of credibility to your voice in that
Exactly.
situation.
So that's been our main advocacy push. And then if I finish the story with the other pillar, then is solutions. And so here is where we have taken a real interest and an active role in sustainability. Obviously, that term is very broad. It includes portions of environment, social, governance, lots of different ways of looking at it. Lots of companies are focused on it, but there is some complexity and some confusion out there as to what should the electronics industry be doing about sustainability. So that is one of our main focus points as an organization. And Europe, as you know, plays a big part in that, because a lot of the environmental pillars and a lot of the environmental concerns usually originate out of Europe. And so we have been forming committees and councils to begin establishing and assessing what should be the right thing for IPC to do to help our industry move forward. And we've established a council, and that council is made up of global members, including many members from Europe. We've got BAE Systems as an aerospace OEM involved. We've got Zollner as a European-based EMS company involved. So we're very excited about that initiative as we move forward. And there'll be more details on that as the year unfolds. We're starting out with doing kind of what we call a materiality assessment of the situation. We're having these companies that are part of this council play a big role in that. And I think very quickly it's going to become pretty apparent, what the industry really wants to prioritize for sustainability, and then what will IPC's role there be to help move that forward.
Yeah, when I look at IPC's role in many of these things, I just see this global organization that can bring so many people together from different regions, from different parts of the supply chain, and that's where most value can be added. And I look at ESG and I think, well, we just need to be doing more. And I know a lot of that is led out of Europe. And, as a European, I'm proud of that fact. And I think
absolutely, as well, you should be.
We need to measure our companies in terms of their performance on that, just as we do in terms of their financial performance.
And if you look at our DNA historically, historically, we've always been a standards development organization. And some of the key pieces of that are the ability to bring different people to the table, to discuss challenges, work together in some sort of consensus fashion to find a solution. That's kind of what standards development has been. And we've kind of taken that model and we are now extrapolating that across education now. Let's get committees together to talk about what is the right education and right workforce development for both operators and engineers. On the advocacy side, let's make sure that the PCB guys and the EMS guys and the semiconductor guys and the materials folks and the research folks are all sitting down at the table talking together. What oftentimes happens, Phil, and you know this better than anybody, is that a lot of people have great ideas, but those ideas become very siloed, right? And then when you try to look at the linkage between the silos, there isn't any, because they should have been talking together right from the get-go.
Yeah.
We like to say at IPC that from a values standpoint, the C in IPC stands for collaboration. And that's, I think, what we've become experts at, is getting the right people in the room together, building a nice environment for them and saying, okay, here's the challenge. Now figure it out.
Yeah, and you've proved it successfully with things like CFX and various other different processes you've gone through where that collaboration has been hugely successful. I think what's really interesting with ESG is we've got the potential to really reflect what the consumers want from the OEMs, what the OEMs need from the EMSs, and what the EMS companies need from the supply chain. And your ability to bring all of those together is really critical. When you look at the relationship between the different regions within the organization, one of the things that you're really good at is providing data. You have a kind of a team and a relationship with Informa in Germany, and you're starting to produce statistics that look like IPC statistics.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said so. Well, the lion's share of the credit belongs to Dieter Weiss. Philippe and I spoke to Dieter 3-4 years ago. Dieter, being part of the industry before, had his own history with IPC.
Yeah.
No reason to get into the details of that. What's important to say is that I think Dieter saw IPC in a different light. We're a fairly new management team. Dr. John Mitchell has been the CEO just for, he's starting his 11th year. He brought in a fairly new team, but a very experienced team to kind of run, these things. I think Dieter saw us in a different way, and recognized the fact that he could help IPC tremendously. And I think he saw an opportunity for IPC to kind of help him with his research and spreading the word and getting the word out for him. And so it's been a great partnership. And we are thrilled to know him. And he's such a breath of fresh air. And he's so direct and he's so focused on the truth. And it's such an admirable quality to be focused on the truth. And so I think it's been a great partnership. I've seen some of the interviews with him that he's done with you and with others, and I think he thinks the partnership is going great. I think there's bigger things we can do. I know that he's looking now at the US market to see if he can add some value there. He's looking at the Asian market to see if he can add some value there. And we're there to support him, and he's there to support us. He participates in a number of the events that we've done since last year. He'll be participating in at least 4 events with IPC this year. He's a champion for the industry. The industry
he certainly
have
is.
him.
Yeah, he certainly is. And what I think is fascinating when I listen to him, and he's passionate about the EMS industry, and he's passionate about specifically the European industry. But when I look at all these initiatives, it's not about competition between Europe and the US. All of these things are mutually beneficial. The shorter supply chains, the more resilient, robust supply chains that are perhaps more regionalized benefit everybody. And there isn't a one has to lose for the other one to win.
Absolutely. And we're always, when we're talking with, we're talking about the example of Dieter Weiss and Informa here, but this would apply to any partnership. It's always about what can we do in a complementary basis to help and value and benefit the industry, right? Yeah. For us, it's not about competition. We certainly don't want to start our own statistics program in Europe. Why should we? We've got a guy that's been doing it for 20 years and he's fantastic at it. So how can we bolt ourselves onto that and provide him some value while he's providing our members some value? And there are examples of that in Asia, and there are examples of that in the US that we've been part of. And that's the thing that we're focused on. Getting back to your original question about Europe, is for us, what our members have told us is, we know you guys do standards and we know you guys do certification, but what we really need IPC to do is make the industry more visible to the consumers, to the policymakers. And so part of our strategy that Philippe and I have designed for the region is we just need to be showing our faces more often. So whereas 5 years ago, Phil, maybe we were part of 2 trade shows, Productronica, and maybe we do another one. Now we're doing 8 to 10 trade shows, right? Yeah. We're doing a trade show in Turkey this year. In a couple of weeks, we will be in Budapest at a Hungarian Inno-Electro show. We've added Estonia to our list of places we're going to be. And this is all about supporting the industry and making sure that the industry understands that we're there to support them in any way they need us to support.
Yeah, and what I love is that you can respond to the industry. If someone turns around to Philippe and say, we need an event in France that covers this, you can put a day together and you can get the right kind of people in front of them, and you can create the right audience for those events. And I think that's hugely successful, and that agility and ability to bring people together. And I love what you said about the C standing for collaboration. I think that's creating collaborations is the most important thing a trade association can do.
Yeah, we've got a lot of C words that we think we feel very strongly about. I mentioned collaboration. I talked about complementary earlier. And then I think the biggest C word that we're using, and I think you probably saw this at Apex too, is we have a new magazine called Community that's out. And we're really trying to build various communities, and some of them are generic in fashion and some of them are very, very targeted. Advanced packaging has become a very big theme of ours, and there's a very targeted community that we're building there. Again, we're doing it because we want the right players talking to each other, because we don't want solutions created in a vacuum. We want solutions created in an open, consensus building environment, because we think at the end, if it's done that way, everybody in the supply chain benefits. Whether and everyone from the supply chain. It's interesting. Did some interviews in France last week in terms of the value of standards, not just IPC standards, but standards in general. We talked about IEC. We talked about other standards as well. And in France, it came down to 4 words, and it's 4 very simple words. You know them, everybody knows them, but it was nicely crystallized by that group of French engineers: cost, efficiency, quality, reliability.
Yeah.
and some Venn diagram that shows some overlap between those four different categories. That's what they're striving for when they want to adopt standards in their manufacturing processes.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw one more C in, and that's communication. I think you've done a great job of that this year. It was nice at Apex to be able to talk to John, to be able to spend some time with Sean. I just came off another conversation with Sean recently talking about the economic indicators that the EMS industry should be focused on, to speak to Matt Kelly on the technology side, and now to speak to you as well. So I really appreciate the IPC being so open in its communication with the media and to the broader audience. So,
well, I mean, I think the reason we do it is because we recognize the value that you're bringing. You're supporting the industry in your own way, and whatever we can do to help you continue to benefit and value the industry, we want to be part of that. And I think that's one of the culture points that John brought to the organization and brought to the industry is, we have a very much a leave your egos at the door mentality. It's not about taking credit and doing that. We are happy to go solo when it's right to go solo, and we're happy to be teamwork and partners when it's right to be teammates. I think that's we look at how do we bring the best value to the member is really the mission, and we look at all forms. So I think working with you and working with Eric and working with the other folks, it's been great because we see the tremendous value that collectively we can bring to the industry.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing, Sanjay. You're doing a fabulous job. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you next time in Europe or the US or wherever we both happen to be.
I appreciate the catch up, Phil. Always a pleasure to speak to you, and I look forward to our next opportunity as well.